Which side are you on?
Boys,
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Tell me
which side are you on?
My daddy was a miner, he's now in the air and sun. He'll be with your fellow workers until the battle's won. Hey,
which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Tell me
which side are you on? Boy, which side are you on? There are,
let's say in Harlan County, there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Hey, which
side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a mousy scab or will you be a man?
Hey,
which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Tell me
which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on? Don't scalpel the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize.
Hey,
which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Tell me
which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
Which side are you on, boys?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on?
I think everybody in here is on the right side.
We have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. We have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free. We were the first to march that protest trail when the plight of children's labor she unveiled. In our hearts we knew we could not fail. When court's own rebel daughter told our tale. Oh, we have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. We have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free. The policemen had their baton bombs and guns and drew from endless capitalistic funds. And all we had were pockets full of stones. But we were led by fearless Mother Jones. Oh, we have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. We have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free. Well, those were cruel, hard, depressive times. With no thought they sent us down the mines. For us, no school or children's nursery. We were victims of the owner's greed. Oh, we have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. We have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free. Oh, those in power gave her no sympathy in her fight to set the children free. Now she lies in Mount Olive, Illinois. with her boys. Oh, we have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. We have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free. Oh, we have freedom. Freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. Oh, we have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free.
We have freedom.
Oh, freedom in our bones, we are the children of our Mother Jones. Oh, we have freedom as we fight for liberty. We'll never be forgotten while she strives to set us free.
We'll never be forgotten
while she strives to set us free.
Long-haired preachers come out every night to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when asked about how something to eat, they will answer in voices so sweet. Speaking of eat, it's coming pretty quick. You will eat by and by in that glorious land of the sky. Work and pray,
Work and play,
live on hay,
live on hay.
you'll get pie
In the sky when we die.
That's a lie. And the Salvation Army they play. They sing and they clap and they pray till they get all your coin on the drum. Then they'll tell you when you're on the bum. You will leave by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay,
Live on hay.
you'll get pie in the sky when you die. Holy rollers and jumpers come out. They holler, they jump, or they shout. Give your money to Jesus, they say. He will cure all your troubles today. And you will leave by and by in that glorious land above the sky, way up high. Work and pray, live on hay,
Live on hay.
You'll
Get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie.
if you fight hard for children and wife. Try to get something good in this life. You're a sinner, a bad man, they tell. When you die, you will sure go to hell. And you will leave by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay,
Live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie.
Working men and women of all countries unite. Side by side for freedom we fight. When this world and its wealth we have gained, to the grafters and the billionaires we sing this refrain. You will leave by and by when you've learned how to cook and to fry. Chop some wood, it'll do you good.
It'll do you good.
You will eat in the sweet by and by. Yes, you will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky.
Way up high.
Work and pray, live on hay.
Live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Post-World War II, the middle of the 20th century, the early 1950s, union power in America was at its peak. 1 in 3 workers in America at that time was a union member. And today, the figure is 1 in 10 workers is a union member, and only 6% in the private sector. So that is the scale of the decline of union power in this country since the middle of the 20th century. And also, of course, at the same time as that, and in particular, since the dawn of the Reagan era, we've had the huge rise in economic inequality in this country as well. And there's a very famous chart that some of you have probably seen. The chart has 2 lines on it. One line is the amount of wealth held by the top 10% of this country, and the line goes up like that. And the other line is the decline of union density, and the line goes down like that. And they're perfect mirror images of one another, you know? And so the breakdown of unions and the breaking of unions in this country enabled that huge rise in economic inequality that has defined the past 50 years of this country. And I think of that rise in inequality that's been going on my entire life. I was born in 1979, so right at the dawn of the Reagan era, you know, this is the story of my lifetime. That inequality is kind of the big macro crisis that underlies a lot of our other political crises that we see. Sometimes the discrete little political issues that pop up are really manifestations of this big and ongoing crisis of inequality that we're all trying to deal with. And the level of inequality that we have here, you know, it warps our economy, it warps our politics and our electoral system, and it in many ways sort of snuffs out the American dream. You know, the idea that probably some people in this room grew up with, that you could have a 1-income household and you could be a blue-collar worker and you might be able to buy a home and you might be able to send your kids to college. That doesn't exist anymore. That people will laugh at you if you say that today. You know, that is something that has disappeared over the past few generations. And when the American dream disappears like that, it makes people cynical, it makes people angry, and it opens the door, I think, to the rise of people like Trump. So a lot of the political problems that we have, again, are rooted in this big, long, ongoing rise in inequality. And when you think about how to turn around something as large as the rise of economic inequality, there's basically only 2 ways to do it. Either the government can do it, they can do it through the tax code, they can tax the rich, they can regulate business, they can push income down the chain. If you think that the US government is going to do that anytime soon, you're more optimistic than me, because they haven't done it for 50 years, and that's part of the reason how we got here in the first place. And the only other way to turn around inequality is for working people to regain enough power to reclaim their fair share of the wealth in this society. And of course, unions are the tool that working people use to do that. And so as I came to understand this, you know, I came to understand that unions, despite their long, long decline, are still the single most important tool to fix the single most important problem that we have in this country. Now, on top of that long macro crisis of inequality, you know, we had this acute crisis of the pandemic. And throughout the years of the pandemic, I was a full-time labor reporter that time. I was writing for Indies Times magazine, and I was talking to workers all over the country. You know, and everybody that I talked with during those years, except for the people like me who are lucky enough to be able to work on a computer and sit at home, everybody else was in basically one of 2 types of crisis. Either, you know, their work had closed down overnight, they found themselves unemployed, they had trouble accessing unemployment benefits, and they were in this immediate financial crisis, or, you know, they were told that they were essential workers and that they had to continue working and that they had to risk their own health to keep America running during that time. And in most cases, and this is not news to any of you, you know, most of those essential workers did not get any permanent gains for that risk and sacrifice that they took during those years. You know, I remember I wrote a story about grocery workers in Virginia who had been deemed essential workers and worked during the pandemic. And, you know, I remember interviewing a woman who worked in the grocery, and she lived with her 2 kids, and she did not hug her children for a year because she was scared of bringing home COVID from the grocery store to them. You know, and that is unfortunately a story that was replicated millions of times across America. And what did those grocery workers get for coming to work? They got a $2 an hour raise that lasted for 3 months, and then the company rolled it back. So again, no permanent gains, no permanent thank you for risking their lives during that time. So the pandemic was in a lot of ways a radicalizing experience for millions of workers, even if they wouldn't use those words. You know, you had millions and millions of people all over the country who had this really direct experience of seeing, like, there is no safety net for me. There is nothing here. Work doesn't love me. The boss is not going to save me. And all those people saw that they needed something to protect themselves. You know, without a union, they had nothing. And I think that that experience is one of the main reasons why public opinion polls tell us today labor unions are more popular than they've been in 60 years. The public approval of labor unions in this country is higher than it's been since the 1960s. Tens of millions of Americans say that they want, you know, what the labor movement has to offer. And during the same time, we've had a pretty pro-union president. So, you know, the things are lined up pretty well. We're in a moment of enormous opportunity for organized labor in this country. People want what we have. And yet, if you look at the statistics, every year union density in this country continues to go down. And so there's this kind of huge gap between the potential of the labor movement and the reality of it in America. And that right there was really the seed for me to start writing my book. And it's kind of what my book is about. How do we break out of this, you know? My book is reported all over the country. It has stories in it that I think represent both the good and the bad aspects of the labor movement. And obviously, you can only scratch the surface, you know, in any single book, and probably every union in this room you could tell an incredible story about. But I'll tell you a few of the ones that are in my book. I have a chapter on child care workers in the state of California who spent 20 years, a 20-year-long campaign to unionize 40,000 in-home child care workers in the state of California. They had to change the state law. They had to go all around the state organizing 40,000 disparate workers who had no common workplace, who spoke 100 different languages, and they pulled it off. And I spoke to women whose mothers were there when they began this organizing campaign 20 years ago. The mother retired, the daughter went into the business, and the daughter was there when the campaign succeeded after 20 years. And they won, and they did in fact sign their first union contract, and they're negotiating a new one. It's such a great, inspiring example of what can be done if unions really have a vision and stick with it. I have a chapter in the book about the culinary union in Las Vegas. This is one of the, if not the most powerful local unions in the United States of America, and they have, you know, the whole casino industry is in this union, and fun fact is they just succeeded in unionizing the entire Las Vegas Strip. The Venetian was the last property on the Las Vegas Strip that wasn't union. They got it. So if you go to Las Vegas now, you might not feel good about yourself for any other reason, but you'll be staying in a union property, so you can feel good about that. But you know, they did this through 80 years of organizing and striking and fighting and fighting and fighting. And they built the middle class of Las Vegas. You know, Las Vegas and the casino industry would not naturally produce middle class jobs. It was purely the work of the culinary union that did that. And at the same time, they also turned themselves into one of the strongest political forces in the state of Nevada. You know, every 4 years, the Nevada caucus happens, and all the presidential candidates go right down to the Union Hall at the end of the Vegas Strip, and they sit in a room like this, and the room is full of people who clean rooms and who serve food and who serve drinks, and every presidential candidate comes and talks to those people because that union has organized themselves into such a strong political force. And they're such a great example of the fact that, you know, our power as a labor movement doesn't come from writing a check to a politician. You know, it comes from organizing working people into an army that has to be feared and has to be respected. And that's what they've done there. And they're a great role model for every union. And an interesting thing about what they've done in Las Vegas is that, you know, they have a model that can be replicated in more or less any city, and especially in any city that has a tourist economy. Because if you go into any city that has a lot of tourism and you organize the big hotels and you organize the airport and you organize the stadium and you organize the convention center, you have essentially wrapped your hands around the neck of that tourist economy as a union. And you can use that power, that labor power, to really raise standards for working people throughout the whole city. And so I have another chapter in the book about how Unite Here is doing that in different cities, Miami, New Orleans. And this is a formula that works, you know, just as well in red states as it does in blue states. Because it's not about, you know, asking a politician for power, it's about organizing workers and extracting power that way. I also have chapters about some harder things in the labor movement. I have a chapter on the state of South Carolina, which is the single most anti-union state in the United States of America. The lowest union density in America is in the state of South Carolina. I think under 3% of workers there have a union. And I kind of write about what the labor movement looks like there. And interestingly enough, the strongest union in the state of South Carolina that I wrote about a lot in my book is the Longshoremen's Union in the Port of Charleston, the ILA workers who just recently were on strike and won a 62% raise. You know, they're really badass. Yeah. So even in the hardest place in America, union power exists. I wrote about Nabisco workers in Portland, Oregon, who have something that, again, used to be very common in this country, which is a blue-collar job that provides a middle-class living. You know, factory workers at Nabisco have that, but they only have it because the union has been fighting for it for many, many decades, and they had to go on a strike and really risk everything they had just to maintain that. Not even to make any gains, but just to hang on to what they already have, and I wrote a chapter about that. And I also write about a couple of workers. I write about a fast food worker in West Virginia, and I wrote about a Lowe's hardware store worker in New Orleans who are just regular people who tried to unionize their workplaces. And both of them failed. And I wrote about why they failed and sort of what the infrastructure is that we lack that allows corporations to union bust regular working people, and what makes it so hard for regular people to do that thing which should be so easy for everybody, which is to unionize their own job. And throughout the book, I followed Sarah Nelson, who is the president of the Association of Flight Attendants. Some of you might know, I believe she spoke here 2 or 3 years ago. She's a very fiery, kind of progressive, yeah, she's great. You know, and as I was writing the book, she was kind of wrestling with the possibility of running for presidency of the AFL-CIO, which she ended up not doing. If you're interested in why, please read the book. But you know, she also sort of more broadly really wrestles with the idea of like, how do you become a labor movement leader? You know, there's a lot of union leaders and there's a lot of union presidents, but how do you become a leader of this whole movement that's so wide and so disparate? And that's something that she really struggles with and takes seriously. And you know, following Sarah Nelson around for a year as I was reporting the book, I got to hear a lot of Mother Jones quotes, because Sarah Nelson loves Mother Jones, and she can probably stand here without any notes and quote Mother Jones for hours. She takes Mother Jones very seriously. And the Mother Jones quote that she says the most, and that I heard her say the most, is, "The capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing, but the fact that they themselves are continually organizing shows their real beliefs." And I like that quote because, you know, it tells us that we need to be organizing always. You know, we don't get to stop. You know, the labor movement is not something that you finish. The labor movement is not like a game that we will win. It is sort of a fight that we all inherit and we participate in, and we carry it for our whole lifetime, and we do the work, and then one day we pass it off to the next generation. And our responsibility, I think, all of our responsibility who are part of the labor movement, is to try to leave this movement stronger for the next generation than we got it. And I have to, you know, when I put on my honest journalist hat, I have to say that, unfortunately, by that standard, during my entire lifetime and even longer than that, the institutions of organized labor have been failing to leave this movement stronger for the next generation than they inherited. You know, the biggest thing that the labor movement needs is we need more people. It's really that simple. You know, the role of this movement is to balance out the power of corporate America, you know, and you can't balance out the power of trillion-dollar corporations with 10% of the workforce. The math just doesn't work. You know, we need more people in this movement. We need to increase union density, and that is the number one job of my union, of your union, and of all of us. I always think of the decline of union power in America. It's a little bit like climate change, in the sense that it's a slow-moving disaster. You know, every year it gets a little bit warmer, and every year the sea level rises just a tiny little bit. You know, and it goes slow enough that if you want to ignore it year over year, you can, because it's not that different from last year. But if you look at the line on the chart and you see where it's going and you project it forward, it's going to end in disaster. And the decline of worker power in this country is the same way. You know, every year goes down just a little bit. And if we want to ignore it, we can, but we know how this ends. We have to turn it around. And one of the most memorable moments for me when I was reporting my book was I went to the 2022 AFL-CIO convention. You know, it's like the presidential convention for unions. And the AFL-CIO was getting a new president, and she came out and she gave a big welcome speech, and everybody clapped. And she made a big announcement, you know, for her first speech. And the big announcement that she made at the convention was that we are going to commit to unionize 1 million new workers in the next 10 years. And everybody clapped and cheered, 1 million new workers. And so I got out my calculator and I did a little bit of math, and it turns out that if you unionize 1 million new workers in the next 10 years, union density will keep going down, because that's not even enough to keep up with the new jobs that are going to be created in that time. And so, you know, the stated goal of our central institution is continued decline of that movement. And it was just a moment for me that was so kind of emblematic of some of the lack of ambition that sits at the heart of the labor movement in certain places. You know, we need to think in terms of organizing not the next 1 million new workers, but the next 10 million new workers. That's the way that we need to think. And the reality is that there are parts of the labor movement that have that kind of ambition, that do think like that. You know, I think of the United Auto Workers, for example, who, you know, they won a big strike, and they came out of winning that strike, and instead of, you know, taking a year off, they said, we're going to go down south and organize 150,000 non-union auto workers in the South, the most hostile and hardest place to unionize, because that's what it's going to take for us to maintain our power. You know, that is the kind of ambition that we need. You know, Unite Here, one of the unions I wrote about in my book, they just elected a new president, and the first thing she did when she took over was to double the organizing budget of that union. You know, that is the kind of ambition that we need. And I think about Sarah Nelson's own union, the Association of Flight Attendants. That union has about 50,000 members nationally, and they are currently in an organizing drive at Delta to try to organize 28,000 new flight attendants at Delta, which would mean increasing the union's membership by more than 50% in one campaign. You know, that is the kind of ambition and vision that we need in the labor movement. And, you know, and it's out there, it's everywhere. I meet people in the labor movement all over the place who are incredible and are doing great things. You know, we just need to scale that up to everywhere. And, you know, sometimes when I talk about this with union people, they'll tell me, well, that's hard. You know, it's hard to organize 10 million people. It is. You know, we unionized 100 people at my job, and that was hard. So it is hard to unionize 10 million people. But when people tell me that, you know, I think about the mine workers a century ago. You know, same people that Mother Jones was working with. The mine workers in West Virginia a century ago, when they wanted a union, the first thing the company would do would be to evict them all from their homes because they lived in company towns. So, you know, their families got evicted from their homes and they had to go live in tents down by the railroad tracks. And then the company would run a rail car down the tracks and have a guy standing on it with a Tommy gun and shoot up all the tents at night as the workers slept down there by the tracks. And so the workers began taking their cast iron pans that they cooked with and propping them up against the edge of the tents to catch the machine gun bullets so that they didn't hit their kids at night. You know, that's how much they wanted a union. And by the way, they won. That's the United Mine Workers, you know. So, you know, however hard it is for us today, it's not as hard as that. People have done harder things in this movement before that, and we just need to follow in that kind of example that they've set for us. Now, I'll mention that we're in an election year, and you hear a lot on the news, particularly during election years, about saving democracy. We need to save democracy, we need to preserve democracy. Democracy is so important. And you know, when I hear that, I always think, where do regular Americans get to experience this democracy that we all hear so much about? You know, where do people actually live democracy in their daily lives? I'm getting there. You're born, you're in a family. Family's not a democracy, that's a dictatorship. Then you go to school. School is not a democracy, school is a dictatorship. And then you get out of school and you get a job, and your job is not a democracy either. Your job is a dictatorship. So where do people get the lived experience of democracy? And the answer, yes, for millions of people, is that in a good union is the first and only place that millions and millions of Americans get that lived experience of democracy, you know, that lived experience of being in a democratic organization that listens to them and that's responsive to the will of the members, you know. And so being in a union, it's not, you know, a union is not a special interest. A union is not something that asks politicians for the sort of thing that special interests ask for. You know, a union is a school for democracy, a training school for democracy. And we need many, many more people to be able to have that experience. You know, if we want people to appreciate the democracy that we need to save, we need to give people that lived experience of democracy. And it's just another reason why we need to organize millions of new people, because right now, 90% of working people never have that experience. And, you know, here are the things that we know for a fact. Unions built the middle class. When unions were strong, we had the greatest shared prosperity that this nation has ever seen. Ironically, that produced the golden age of America that right-wingers often talk about wanting to go back to, even though they were the ones that broke the unions. And as unions have been systematically destroyed, inequality has grown, the American dream has gotten a lot harder to find, and people have gotten more cynical, you know? And today we're in a time when people want unions, people say they want unions, people need unions. And it's our task, all of us, to give those unions to all the people that need them, you know? And if you wonder to yourself, who is it who is going to give all of the people of America the unions that they need? Look around this room. It's us. We are the labor movement. The people in this room, you and me and all of us, are the labor movement, and this is our job. Unfortunately, there is no pro-union Batman who is going to swoop in from outside and grant unions to all of the Americans that need them. It's on our shoulders. It is my responsibility and your responsibility and all of our responsibility. The labor movement of today has to create the labor movement of tomorrow that we want to see. And if you take anything from the speech today, I hope you take that vision with you. And I'd like to close. By reading you my favorite quote about the labor movement, which was said by Eugene Debs. He said it in 1904. Now, I know that I'm at the Mother Jones dinner, and so I didn't want to step on Mother Jones's toes by reading a Eugene Debs quote. So I looked up what Eugene Debs had said about Mother Jones. And let me read you, Eugene Debs said in 1907 about Mother Jones. He said, "No other soldier in the revolutionary cause has a better right to recognition in this edition than has Mother Jones. Her very name expresses the spirit of the revolution." So I just want to get that out of the way and say Eugene Debs was a big fan of Mother Jones also. And now, this is what Debs said about the labor movement. He wrote this in 1904. He said, 10,000 times has the labor movement stumbled and fallen and bruised itself and risen again, been seized by the throat and choked and clubbed into insensibility, enjoined by courts, assaulted by thugs, charged by the militia, shot down by regulars, traduced by the press, frowned upon by public opinion, deceived by politicians, threatened by priests, repudiated by renegades, preyed upon by grafters, infested by spies, deserted by cowards, betrayed by traitors, led by leeches, and sold out by leaders. But notwithstanding all this and all these, it is today the most vital and potential power this planet has ever known, and its historic mission of emancipating the workers of the world from the thraldom of the ages is as certain of ultimate realization as is the setting of the sun. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mother Jones Society. You all are awesome.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble power won? For the union makes us strong. Everybody. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never told to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth the new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us